What you doing there? Oh, I'm just painting over some of my old sketches. Are you writing something down? Don't worry about it.
This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Whether you need hosting for your art portfolio, blog, or online store, Squarespace has all the website building, marketing, and analytics tools you need to build a sleek website and grow your brand. Hi, I'm Jonathan Frakes, and welcome to the next installment of I am trying to finish up this sketchbook. Now, if you've caught the last couple videos of mine, I've basically been trying to finish this up because you guys keep demanding to see the sketchbook tour, but it's not done. Now, this is pretty thick, but do not let your eyes deceive you because there's a lot of pages in here. We're halfway through. I was like, you know what? I hate how this looks, and it is now a problem for later Kira. Hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you. I'm later Kira. It is time for me to suffer the consequences of my past actions. How have I chosen to deal with them, you might ask? Theft of intellectual property. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but basically I saw people who paint with gouache on YouTube painting over their sketches, and I went, you know what? I too would like to make some of that content. And here it is, but with acrylic paint. So it's different. So let's get started on painting over these sketches, but first, while I still have your attention, allow me to tell you about this video's sponsor, Squarespace. If you're a freelance artist like myself, then you need a place to show off all that beautiful artwork you're making. Squarespace offers dozens of professional and customizable website and portfolio templates tailored for the needs of artists, bloggers, and merchants. I use Squarespace to build my portfolio site. It only took about an hour, and I was able to fully customize my site colors, text, pages, and thanks to great features like automatic image scaling, I was able to simply upload all of my portfolio pieces and they were automatically beautifully arranged and I didn't have to do anything. Since then, I've been building onto my website here and there to add a bit of spice, because if there's one thing that I have, it is an insatiable appetite for maximalism. Since a lot of clients also like to see your more unfinished and iterative work, I've been using their embedding features to add some of my sketchbook tours to my page, and I've also added in my Instagram gallery to show some of my more recent sketches. And doing this is super easy because Squarespace can link to your various social media accounts, and you can use a social block to share recent social media posts on your Squarespace site. And if that isn't already enough, Squarespace also has a super convenient e-commerce platform that can be featured right alongside your portfolio site. And once again, thanks to that high connectivity, I can link my print-on-demand service directly to my Squarespace store so that I don't have to be hands-on while fulfilling orders, because honestly, who has time for that? Organized people. That's who. So if you want to begin your passion project this year, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/pricklyalpaca to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace for returning to sponsor the channel. Now let's begin painting over my questionable sketches. I have a couple of different sketches I want to tackle today. One of them is of my OC Orchid. I have a few others that are Spider-Man. And finally, if we have time, there's a sketch of Vi and Jinx in here that is an absolute atrocity, and I would like to cover it up as soon as humanly possible. So since there are so many of these questionable sketches in my sketchbook, it kind of took me a while to decide which ones to actually do, but I did want to start off with a more relaxing sketch, so I chose a portrait. It's kind of a filler sketch that I have in my sketchbook on a page that I am not a huge fan of, which is one reason why I wanted to paint it, so that it brings a little bit more life to this page. But this sketch is of my character Orchid. She's absolutely a comfort OC of mine. She is so much fun to draw, and I don't know if you guys have ever tried doing this, but if you haven't, I highly recommend it. She is designed sort of using all of my default drawing methods for like faces and things. She's kind of the epitome of like same face syndrome characters for me, or rather she was whenever I first designed her. Her design has evolved a lot since then, and now she looks a lot more like a unique and individual character, but that was kind of the idea behind designing her in the first place, was just to create a really fun, spoopy character that I can draw a lot. And honestly, her whole little team and their story started out that way. It It was literally just like a little drawing exercise that I did for fun, just to create some like Scooby-Doo-esque spooky characters. I was very into like Gravity Falls and Stranger Things at the time, so I feel like you can see the obvious influence in these character designs from that. I would say out of all of the little comic storyline things that I have, this storyline is probably the furthest along. Like, I've never, besides Nightfall, that's the exception, I've never really made a comic out of any of these ideas and stuck with it, but this one actually did get kind of close. I got maybe halfway through chapter 1 with the pages, and I did really like how they looked, but then I actually changed the art style pretty much completely halfway through those pages, which is a shame because like I was making it, and then I was like, you know what, this is too cartoony, too simplistic, and I kind of wanted to shift it into what my normal art style was. But they exist out there, so maybe I will actually adapt this into a comic at some point, especially since this, even though it started out as a warm-up, it does have a bit of a story behind it. Like, in my mind, I conceptualized this as like, if I ever pitched a show to like Cartoon Network or Netflix or something, this is sort of the Saturday morning cartoon type thing that I would pitch, like spooky, very much serving Gravity Falls, very much serving Owl House, just like a spiritual successor in my brain to those shows, only a little bit different. Probably a good bit more sci-fi and more 80s Stranger Things-y, but also Scooby-Doo. Like, I realize I'm just saying the names of other shows right now, but that's sort of the general vibe that I want to get across. Only I definitely want to dive more into the characters themselves, especially the main trio of Orchid, Paul, and Randler, just because I feel like they do have quite substantial like backstories and like familial relationships to explore, especially Orchid, with her basically being the main character, and especially the dynamic between those three characters, because like Paul and Randler are brothers by blood, and then Orchid is like an adopted sister. So like I really want to write an interesting sibling dynamic, especially since sibling relationships are something that I feel somewhat qualified to write, since I do have a good relationship with my sibling. They say write what you know, so with this story, I'm kind of trying to pull a little bit from my real life experience, even though it is limited, you know? But anyways, I know you guys want to know more about these characters, and I am going to tell you a little bit about Orchid, but I actually have a video planned later. I don't know when it's going to come out, but I'm going to talk a little bit about a few of my OCs and their like backstories and lore in that video, so I just want to like wet the palate with this one and not give away so much. But basic premise for her character, she's just like this mysterious girl that comes to town out of nowhere, and Paul and Randler just find her sleeping and living in their grandfather's treehouse, and they're like, where the heck did you come from? We're calling the police. I mean, like, Paul is very much not having it, but he's also kind of intrigued at the same time, and of course Randler, being the curious cat that he is, just wants to know more about her and where she came from, so they do reluctantly kind of let her hide out in their treehouse for a little bit, and then they sort of start to become friends, and she tries to sort of blend into their school, and then their mom finds out about her, and it's all kind of like first season of Stranger Things where they're trying to hide Eleven, that vibes, but like a little bit different. You get me? But what they don't know about her at first is that she basically has superpowers because she's part Wendigo and she's a witch, but she's in disguise with a spell, so they can't tell right away. And the reason she's in their town in the first place, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up calling the town Sweeney Hollow, because it is a super cool name for a town because of like Sleepy Hollow and also Sweeney Todd, and also because there is a road close to where I live called Sweeney Hollow, and my friend told me about it and I was like, that is the coolest thing, and I'm stealing that. I'm getting away from the point, but the reason why she's in their town is that it's sort of one of those stereotypical like weird paranormal crap happens here kind of towns, and she basically knows the reason why that's happening there, and she's looking for the person who's causing it. The lore and like all of the details are definitely not all figured out. A lot of it just lives in my brain, but since a lot of you guys were asking about it, I figured I would give you like a little synopsis. I definitely want to do more things with this story and talk more about it on the channel because it's definitely a story that I want to tell and like fully flesh out because I am very attached to these characters at this point. And I don't know, it's just sort of about taking all of those like special nostalgic things about my childhood and meshing them with things that I'm really passionate about and into now and sort of making something that is very unique to me. Because whenever I've heard like Alex Hirsch and the Duffer Brothers talk about like Stranger Things and Gravity Falls, I feel like those were big components in constructing the tone and the feel of those stories. And I feel like whenever you do something similar, you come out with like a very unique property, you know what I'm saying? I pretty much didn't talk at all about the process for this painting, but it's pretty much the same as it is for most of my paintings. I will say I really like how it turned out. It was really fun to practice like a darker skin tone because it's still something that I'm trying to improve on, and I do like how it came out. But I promise I'll talk more about the painting itself in this next section. Okay, next I'm just going to be working on some Spider-Mans. These were definitely sketches where I'm just trying to fix up the page and make it look nice because this page was some figure drawings and gesture drawings that I did because I was working on some Spider-Man art for a client and I wanted to get a feel of different poses and gestures for Spider-Man because I was trying to come up with a good pose for the piece and I was struggling a lot, and I feel like there's just this like movement and flow to illustrations of Spider-Man that I was trying to nail down, and obviously I feel like I didn't do too well on this page itself, but I also did more gestures digitally that I feel like really helped me. But I still like these. I think they're fun and cute, and I think they looked better once I put some paint on them. And as you can probably see right off the bat, I struggled with these quite a bit just because the foundational sketches themselves were not great, and whenever I'm trying to go in and fix something traditionally, there's a lot of futzing that happens. There's a lot of like trying to make sure proportions are good and everything lines up, and with the way these were in the limited space that I had on the page, it was like I couldn't really fix the gestures as easily as I wanted to. Like I think the poses overall ended up looking like a little bit stiff just because if I had drawn the gestures better in the first place, I think that they would just have a little bit more movement and momentum to them. But that was the point. I was trying to warm up for a bigger digital piece, and I probably should have done this in my other sketchbook that I've been doing a little bit more like throwaway art in, but I did it in this one because it's what was handy, and now we're facing the consequences. But basically the way I went about doing these was I very simply just filled in the red and the blue of his costume, and then any place where I felt like the anatomy could be tweaked or wasn't long enough, I would just extend that part of the color, and then once that was dry, I would go in with some of my very opaque deleter white comic book ink, and then I would just sort of fill in the area around that to make like a solid shape, to make pretend that I drew it right in the first place. But that's sort of how I just got the foundation down, to just make the poses look a little bit better. They're still not great gestures, but that was sort of my initial layer to make them look like somewhat competent art. To me, you can disagree if you want, but I don't even know if I would really call these paintings. I feel like I'm more just coloring them in because I didn't really do a whole lot of rendering in the end. I kind of kept these very simple for the most part because the foundational sketches themselves didn't have a lot of detail. It's not like I put any muscle definition on them, you know, for the most part. So I kind of just tried to give the impression of some gradients and a little bit of like saturation variation here and there. And then in the end, I finally added some like teal rim light in a couple of places, which I actually kind of don't like very much, but it is what it is. I think if I were to go back, I would probably maybe not do that at all, or I would just make it look better because normally that's a trick that works pretty well. I'm not sure why I ended up disliking how it looked so much, but you know, I don't mind it so much because the pop of color of the teal on the page looks good, because later on I also did add some little like comic booky effects with some yellow paint just to make things pop. I added a thwip in the corner, which is always fun, and I love a good primary color scheme, so this page definitely looks better than it looked before, but they're not amazing, they're not great, and that's okay. And while I'm finishing these up, I'm just gonna complain, and maybe this is a problem that is unique to me, but I like to think it isn't, because I want to believe I'm more competent than I probably am. But for some reason, I find Spider-Man very difficult to draw. Like, just proportioning him as a character, not even necessarily posing him, like that's a whole different animal, but just drawing things that are not that detailed for me, I don't know what happened. It's maybe my maximalist brain, but for some reason I struggle with making it look good, and I am so envious of people who can do those like really simple, like broken down, clear drawings of like Spider-Man. Like when Spider-Verse came out, there was so much fan art that looked like that, and I was like, oh, I'm so jealous. It looks so nice, and it seems like for them, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's really hard to do, but it seems like it's genuinely fun to draw. So like I just have a wish in my heart to become really good and competent at drawing Spider-Man, because my god, I love him so much. He's my favorite superhero. So hopefully the more I draw him, the more I will get a feel for this character and figure out what the heck I'm doing, because the last few times I've done it, it's been a real challenge for me. But I think that's just part of my art journey, because recently, like, my draftsmanship and just very fundamental things have been lacking a little bit. I think mostly just because I have been focusing so much on putting out content rather than sort of like focusing inward and practicing and learning and doing fundamentals. It's just very hard to focus on doing studies whenever I am doing so much art round the clock just as like normal work stuff. But anyways, hopefully over the next couple of months, as I do more client work and I do more videos like this where I just get to sit down and like paint and draw a little bit, I'll be able to focus on improving some of my skills and my draftsmanship, and I'll be able to just focus on learning how to draw Spider-Man really good, because that's really all I want in life. I just want to be able to draw my one true love, Spider-Man. That's it. That's all. And finally, for the last painting, we have a sketch of Vi and Jinx sitting back to back. This is actually something I've had in mind for a while, and I've sketched it out digitally too, but I haven't had time to work on that one, and since this one was just in my sketchbook, taking up space and looking kind of ugly, I really wanted to paint over it and at least try to make it look nice, and I think in the end, I pretty much succeeded. I do like how it looks. I'm always gonna have my gripes, but I think I consider this one a win. But speaking of gripes, this was actually a super tricky painting to do. I kind of started out with something that I've seen a lot of people do, where they like do a layer, like an ink wash or some kind of like, I forget the technical term for it. I'm not well versed in painting things, but I tried to do like a wash of magenta over the surface of my characters just to sort of like tone them for the correct lighting for the scene. And then I did like a layer of dark navy around them to sort of set the background, and then I tried to build up the layers from there. And I use acrylic paint, super weird. I mix it with water all the time, and I low-key use it as if it's gouache. And I know a lot of people are like, you know, you could just use gouache, but gouache and we're not exactly like on speaking terms right now. I've used it once in the past, and it didn't do what I wanted it to do, so I got really stubborn, and I was like, all right, listen, you don't have to be such a drama queen about it. If you're not gonna cooperate, then you can just stay in my drawer. I know this is user error. I'll figure it out eventually. I don't care. Acrylic paint works for me, so it's fine. But basically, layering was tricky because the lighting in the scene was not like default daylight. It was a little bit different, and in the end, I don't even know if I really achieved the lighting. Like, the lighting, it's not realistic, but I just kind of tried to make it what I felt like making it and what I thought looked kind of good, because hey, that's basically what painting is, right? But I sort of began by layering the skin tones and sort of trying to define where the planes of the faces were and what shadows were falling, because I feel like that's something that I don't always do in paintings in general. It's sort of like treating shadows like they exist. Wow, very basic thing to do, but I do that thing with shading faces where I sort of like shade them as if you have like a like texture or shading map on a 3D model and then you have like shading over that. I kind of stop at that texture map place a lot whenever I'm painting and shading faces. I'm trying to get past that because that's not how it works. But in this piece, I kind of feel like I did the opposite. Like, normally there's a lot of tonality and sort of like shade variation to the cheeks and the nose and the different like regions of the face. But with this, I sort of went, okay, shadows are here, and that's for the most part what I did, especially with Jinx, because I just sort of liked how it looked with hers, and I was like, I'm not gonna mess with this. I'm not gonna rock the boat here. I did a little bit more with Vi, but in the end, I didn't really love how Vi looked anyway, so it's like I could have gone a little further with that, but you know. From there, it was a lot of struggling with trying to get like proportions right, because in the initial sketch, I know my proportions were a little bit off. Like, I think their torsos were a little bit too short, and then like the leg positions, especially with Vi, it didn't look quite right. So I had to go in and sort of like tweak things and move my color blocks, as I like to call them, around to make everything look right. And in the end, I feel like I still didn't quite hit the right marks. I probably should have gone in and finished the ballpoint pen sketch that I had. If you can tell at the beginning, I had started a ballpoint pen sketch, didn't finish it earlier, and I never did. So I wonder why things don't turn out quite right, and the answer is always, hey, you didn't take the time to make a good foundation for this piece of art. Surprise, surprise. It's just because I'm impatient and I really like the coloring and painting phase because it is more fun most of the time. But anyways, you know, as I was saying before, the clothing was a struggle. Trying to get portions were a struggle, and just a lot of struggling going on. But I do have to say, a lot of things I ended up liking. I like how Jinx came out for the most part. She was a little bit easier for me to do just because her character design is mostly skin. So like you can actually see like the planes of her body and what direction like she's facing and everything. And with Vi, for the most part, her torso is just covered by a jacket that is sort of very structured that didn't allow me to like in my brain figure out, okay, what direction is she facing so that I can make this look right. And it didn't work out too well with Vi. She looks okay, but I'm kind of upset with how clunky everything looks with her in the end. But something that I'm not upset about is the colors for this. Boy, I love how the colors in this piece came out. I absolutely love it. In my initial concept for this, I had the idea to put like firelights around them because that's sort of like a big motif for the show. And I thought it was like sort of symbolic of, oh, Vi and Jinx, if they had sort of like survived together and went with Echo, they could have been firelights, but they went down different paths and they're not. And that's symbolized by the fact that they're facing different directions, if you can tell by my deep storytelling in this piece here. But I love how bringing that green into the scene sort of united the colors of Vi and Jinx, sort of like the blue and the magenta colors. Just ended up creating this really like satisfying color palette along with the navy colors and everything. And I will say the sort of like impressionistic vibe that the background gives makes up for the fact that the characters are not as detailed as I would maybe normally have them. I kind of ran out of time for like rendering this and futzing with it. Normally I would probably go over it a good bit more and like mess with all the details and refine them a little bit more, but screw it, looks fine. Regardless of the nitpicks, it was just so fun to like sit down and paint my girls. I've been wanting to do a big painting like this in my sketchbook for so long, and I love these characters so much. I actually like really want to cosplay both of them. So I know that I've told you guys that I'm gonna cosplay Vi. Like that is a given, but I've actually like kind of got the hankering to cosplay Jinx because I just love her character design so much, and I feel like dressing up like her at a convention would be a lot of fun because like she's crazy. But also I don't know if I have the confidence to do that cosplay because Jinx and I don't have very similar body types, so I don't normally let that stop me. But so much of it would be on display that I'm like, we'll see. We'll see if I can get in shape a little bit more for that one. But I feel like Vi and I, on the other hand, have pretty similar body types, especially if I put on like a little bit of muscle for Vi. I've been skimping on that lately. And like, don't let this make you think, oh, like your body type, whatever, it doesn't matter at all for cosplay. Do whatever you want. Dress up like however you want. This is just like me and my nitpicks and what I want. But I do actually feel like both of these characters are sort of uniquely suited for my face. Like I do not look like many female characters, but I feel like I could realistically like contour my face and make my face look like either Vi or Jinx, which is great. Especially Jinx, because she has these sort of like still very feminine but slightly on the edgier, more masculine side facial features, you know, almost how like grunge emo girls from Tumblr in like 2014 did their makeup, which is kind of how I do my makeup anyways. So I might be able to actually make myself look a little bit like Jinx. We'll see. Anyways, that was a tangent, but here I'm just wrapping things up a little bit, and I'm doing what has become my signature in my art for whatever reason, and I'm adding sparkles all over the place. It's kitschy and kind of stupid, but I don't care. I think it looks great. I'm gonna keep doing it, and if it makes more people upset, you know what? The better. I'm gonna keep doing it. But that is it for all of these little paintings. I know I was a little bit negative here and there in the actual voiceover, but I actually really do love how all of these turned out, especially I would say the little headshot of Orchid. Love it. It's one of my favorite things in my sketchbook at this point, especially with like the stark white of the rest of the page. I don't know, there's something about that that's just like appealing to my lizard brain, or maybe it's my magpie brain. I don't even know at this point. But I do especially love the page turn of having just like a normal page and then flipping it over to the Arcane painting and having almost a full spread. You have like an extra Jinx in there for good measure, but just having a full painting in the sketchbook hits different. I love the variation in those pages, and just we love to see it. I'm so excited to show you guys the sketchbook whenever it's finally done, and I'm hoping maybe it'll just take like one more episode of this to finish this sketchbook. I don't know, but I have at least one more full painting in here of Anakin and Ahsoka that needs to get done, so somewhere in the near future expect another one of these, probably. Anyways, that's all for this video. It's almost 1 a.m, so I need to go to bed.
See you guys next week. Bye.